The following program has a voluntary rating of TV PG-13. Some scenes may contain material that some may consider disturbing and intense. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to Our Family's True Tales of the Supernatural. Today I'll be talking about some more supernatural and paranormal events. First of all, let me give a short update about the paranormal activity in the house where I live. Well, you see, I'm still seeing shadow figures out of the corner of my eyes as I walk around in my house. Every now and then I'll turn my head over in that direction, and then it seems like there's nothing there. I can also say that the house I've been renovating on and off for a few years still has some activity. The other day I saw a few things out of the corner of my eye when I was there. I saw shadow figures, and I saw what looked like debris falling on me or being thrown at me. I would flinch and cringe, but as I looked back, I didn't see anything there. There was no debris on the floor in the area where I thought it would be. Nothing hit me, nor did anything fall on the floor around me. I also thought I saw a section of a homemade scaffold made of 2x4s fall on me, yet it turned out that nothing had really happened at all. These types of incidents where I thought I saw things falling happened about a half dozen times within 2 days. I was starting to get a bit jumpy and nervous because I thought I kept seeing things falling on top of me. I was also getting nervous because I thought I saw similar things as I was driving my car. I thought things were falling on me or that cars were driving right into me. I would do a quick double take and blink my eyes, but as I looked back, there wasn't really any problem. This made me even more jumpy and nervous. I don't want to take much time with this update because it didn't seem like that big of a deal. At least I didn't see any full-body apparitions. So, since I didn't see any apparitions, I'd rather move on to the other stories that I want to talk about. So on that note, let's move on. If you remember in Season 1, I talked about how I was attacked in a dream. I believe it was Season 1, Episode 10. One of the stories in that episode was where I saw what looked like a black cloud that moved down to the ground. As it approached me, it reached out like tentacles, grabbed me, then started punching me and slamming me on the ground. I think I mentioned that I had seen that creature on another occasion. I also mentioned that I would talk about these things in Season 2. That first dream was actually preceded by dreams where I saw that black fog monster previously. It seemed to be stalking me or observing my behavior so it could figure out how to attack me. Then I had that main dream where it did attack me and kept slamming me on the ground. It then dragged me to a small concrete storage shelter where it beat me up some more. It even interrogated me, and when it didn't like my answers, it beat me up even more. I eventually woke up and noticed that I was sore all over my body, as if something really did beat me up. That left me wondering if it was some type of paranormal attack by some type of spirit or spirit entity. One day I had moved away from my home to be with some friends in another part of the country to make a new life for myself. The people I was hanging out with seemed nice at first, yet after a while they seemed to get more and more manipulative, dishonest, and abusive. The worse the situation got, the more I started to have disturbing dreams. Sometimes I had dreams where I saw people standing around me as if they stared at me as if they were angry with me. I then started to have dreams where it seemed like the black fog entities were stalking me once again. The black fog was observing me as it slithered around on the ground. It would also try to stay far enough away that I had difficulty seeing it. It seemed to sneak around neighboring houses and would peek from behind the houses and behind the rows of bushes. If I turned to look at it, the black fog pulled back so I couldn't see it or approach it. It kept hiding behind the neighbors' houses and hedgerows. Yet the black fog seemed to want to figure out how to approach me again to talk to me or attack me. Then I had a dream one night, and it seemed like it was an attack from a spirit or something possibly much more dark. Here's what I saw in my dream, or should I say nightmare. I was in a room with very dim lighting, where the only thing I saw was a chair in the middle of the room. The chair had thin metal legs that seemed like chrome and thin armrests on the sides. It was like an office chair with a thin padded black seat. The armrests looked similar to chrome, but had thin black padding on top of the armrests. There seemed to be a ceiling light above the chair, but it was dim and only illuminated the chair, in the middle of the room, that is. The background seemed like it was dark, and I couldn't see anything else in the room at all. While I was in this room with the single chair, I also noticed something else enter the room. It was a slim black stream of thick black smoke. The stream of smoky mist was only as thick as a person's leg. At first, the smoke moved slow as it billowed along into the room. It slithered across the floor like a snake. It seemed to move into the room at a slow pace, as if it was a cat moving very slow as it stalked its prey. As the black mist drifted into the room with billowing black puffs, I could hear the sounds of whispering. I could also sense that the entities in the black mist were talking to one another. The black mist began to cover a wider space across the floor of the room. It made its way over to me as I stood near the middle of the room, which was about 1 or 2 paces from the chair. The thick black mist slithered over my feet and around my ankles. As it touched my feet, I could hear it talking, and I could understand it quite clearly. I knew that this was the same black mist creature that I had encountered in another dream. It began to say threatening things and began to threaten me. It told me that it could possess and control me without even touching me. At first, I couldn't see how it could possess me without even touching me. I also knew that it was powerful, so I didn't try to challenge it or provoke it. I told the creature that I didn't want to have anything to do with it, or them, or whatever it was. I also let it know that I didn't want it to do anything to me or do any type of bad things to me at all. I moved back away from it and sat in the chair that was on the far side of the room from the door the black mist had entered through. The creature then spoke to me once again. It told me that it could control me through the mere act of flying in a circle around me. It said that it had done this before with other people and that it was easy. I again told it that I didn't want to have anything to do with it and that I refused to cooperate with it in any way, shape, or form. The black mist then told me that I couldn't stop them. The dark entity then moved up from the floor to the height of my chest and began to fly in a circle around me. I was still sitting in the chair and watching it make these strange maneuvers around me. It seemed to fly faster and faster until it seemed to almost become a blur as it kept flying in circles around me. I then noticed a loud roaring noise, and I couldn't figure out what the noise was or where it was coming from. The noise seemed to be coming from nearby, but I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I then noticed that I couldn't move or get up from the chair. I felt as if someone had tied my arms and legs to the chair, and I couldn't move. I tried to get up and walk away, but my muscles seemed to fail to work. So I was stuck there in the chair, and I had no ability to stand up. I then noticed that the loud noise seemed to sound like a loud scream that was like one long roar of a lion. Yet I still couldn't figure out where the noise was coming from. It seemed more and more like it was definitely coming from somewhere very near where I was sitting in the chair. I tried to concentrate on listening very close to the sound so I could pinpoint where the loud sound was coming from. As I listened intently, it seemed like the sound was right next to me. As I shifted my eyes side to side, I didn't see anything close to me that could make the noise. I only saw the black stream flying in a circle around me as fast as lightning. As I took a few more seconds of listening in a careful manner, I finally figured out where the noise was originating. The noise was coming from my own mouth, and I then noticed that my mouth was wide open. I hadn't tried to open my mouth, and I wasn't trying to yell really loud like that. I couldn't figure out what caused my mouth to open or what was making the sound come out of my mouth. I also noticed that I couldn't stop myself, nor could I close my mouth. Some other force was holding my mouth open and making the scream come out of my mouth. I started to realize that I was no longer in control of my body at all. I couldn't get up and walk away, nor did I have the ability to stop my voice from yelling. I then sensed the black fog talking to me again. It told me that it always knew that it was in control when a person screamed in an uncontrolled manner like this. I then tried to cry out to ask God to help me, but I couldn't stop screaming in order to ask for help. I seemed to have lost the ability to close my mouth. I couldn't get myself under control at all. I was under the control and influence of the black fog entities. I then began to cry as I sat in the chair because I felt so helpless. I then noticed that I was crying within my own thoughts because I couldn't control my eyes enough to actually cry. I had even lost the ability to make tears come out of my eyes. I then calmed my mind down a bit and wondered if God could help me and if He could hear me pray in my thoughts. I couldn't get my mouth and voice to work, so my thoughts were all I had. I only hoped God could sense my thoughts. I then prayed within my thoughts and asked God to help me get out of this situation. I also asked God to help me regain control of my body since these creatures had control over me. Everything went dark in an instant, and in an instant, there was only silence. I thought I had fainted, but then I opened my eyes and realized that I woke up in real life. I also realized that at the exact moment I asked for God to help me, it was the exact moment I awoke. For a short time, I was sore and felt like it was difficult to get control of my body again. As I got control of myself, I got out of bed with haste and contemplated what I had experienced in the dream. I then wondered if I needed to separate myself from some of the people I had been around. They were very controlling and unkind, so I knew I needed to separate myself from them as well. I thought that may have been what sparked this situation with this dream. Yet shortly after this time, I separated myself from those people I had been around, and it improved my life a lot. Some people might say that this was only a nightmare or that it was a stress-induced dream. Some people might say it's brought on by a sleep disorder or that I got caught between sleep and consciousness. I would ask, why is it that the trouble only seemed to stop when I asked God to help me? To me, it seemed like God helped me, and if it was only a dream, then I'm glad God ended the torment and misery right then and there. If people choose not to believe me, I could understand. As a young adult, I wouldn't have believed it either. Yet when you experience it for yourself, you begin to see things from a different perspective, and you begin to view it from a different type of a way. I have a cousin who I'll call Michael, who had a demonic dream one night as well. Now, that's not my cousin's real name, but I'll refrain from using his real name in order to protect his privacy. My cousin Michael sent out a message on social media about a terrible dream he had one night. He described his dreams in a social media post, and here's what he mentioned. He said that at first he couldn't tell what was happening, but his voice got constricted. He said something was coming after him and that it attacked him. As the demonic entity apparently tried to choke him, he tried to shout to ask God to help him. He tried a few times to ask for help, but the entity constricted around his throat and he couldn't say anything. Then he was finally able to speak out loud and ask God for help, and when he did, he woke up in an instant. My cousin then mentioned that as he woke up, he said a few prayers and was reluctant to go back to sleep. He also mentioned that he was so scared that he only had a little bit of light sleep after that for the rest of the night. The next day, before he mentioned anything about the dream, he said that his grandma mentioned something eerie. I'll call his grandma by the name Ms. Bonnie. Ms. Bonnie said that she heard someone talking that night and mentioned that the voice sounded rough. She also mentioned that she spoke out loud and asked God for help, and the eerie voice stopped immediately. She had no more problem after that. My cousin mentioned that he thought it definitely was a demonic attack of some sort. Sometime later, my cousin's grandma also wondered if it might be the spirit of her late husband that was speaking. She mentioned that he liked to play practical jokes on people. I don't know if that's what constricted my cousin's voice or if that was what was chasing him in his dream. That sounds like something different that might have been a bit more sinister and dark. That was my family's encounters with those dark entities. I hope I can avoid those entities for the rest of my life, because that was terrifying and the entities were brutal and cruel. Now, on a slightly different note, I'd like to talk about some other incidents I had in a few different dreams. A few years ago in the 1990s, I had a few dreams where I saw some of my relatives who had passed away. I consider this to be a bit rare and yet a bit significant considering some of the aspects of the dreams. I'll tell you about those significant aspects as we get to that part of the story. One night in the 1990s, I had a dream that I found to be very disturbing, or at least part of it was disturbing. I saw three of my mom's aunts in this dream. All three of these aunts were good friends with my mom and I. In real life, I knew the older two had passed on at that time. As I was in the dream, I was standing in a junkyard full of old junky cars, and the three aunts walked into the junkyard. They walked right next to each other, side by side and shoulder to shoulder. I tried to say hello to them, but it seemed like they either didn't hear me or didn't pay attention for some reason. They all kept walking over to an old junk car in the junkyard. As they walked up to the old car, one of them opened the trunk at the back end of the car. All three of my great aunts turned toward me and waved goodbye. All three of them stepped up and got into the trunk of the old car and pulled the trunk lid down with them inside the trunk. So they seemed to lock themselves inside the trunk. A tractor with a crane attached drove up and used its mechanical claw to grab the old car and pick it up. The crane then took the car over to a large car crushing machine. I yelled to the driver of the crane to stop because there were some people in the trunk of the car. As the crane driver put the car down in the compaction machine, I kept yelling to stop them from crushing the car. I kept yelling so much and so loud that tears started coming out of the corners of my eyes. I was sad to see them start the compaction machine, and more tears rolled down my face. I knew my aunts were all going to die, and I couldn't stop it. So all I could do was stand there and cry. As the car was getting crushed, I woke up with tears starting to roll out of the corners of my eyes. I wondered if the dream had more meaning than a mere dream. It sure seemed like it was more than a typical run-of-the-mill dream. I then remembered that two of those women had already passed away, but I started to wonder about the third. I thought she was still alive, so I felt like the dream had a bigger meaning than the average dream or nightmare. Yet I couldn't understand what the meaning could be. The next day, as I thought more about the dream, I asked my mom about the last aunt that I thought was still alive. My mom went to call that last aunt that day, and she found out that the aunt had passed away. I found out that the exact time she passed away was early in the morning, at about the exact same time I had the dream. I then recalled that in the dream, it seemed like they were all bidding me farewell as if they weren't coming back anymore. Yet they had somewhat of a smile on each of their faces as if they were still fond of me. Yet they seemed to want to let me know that they were all moving on and wouldn't see me in this life anymore. Yet it seemed very significant that I saw all three die in the dream at nearly the exact same time that the third aunt died in real life. I consider that it was their way of saying their final goodbyes, and I said my final goodbyes as well. I had another interesting dream in the 1990s, a short time after my dad's father died. My dad's mother had died in the 1980s, and I had a few dreams about her too. I kept seeing her in her house. As I was dreaming this dream about the grandfather, I was walking along a dirt path that had different things along the side of the dirt road. Sometimes I would see people standing along the side of the road. I also noticed that different sections had fields of grass, some were farm fields, and other sections had forestry. The people I saw seemed to take notice to look at me as I walked by. As I kept walking along the path, I looked up ahead on the long, straight road, about 100 feet or 33 meters. I thought the people I saw looked like a young adult couple who were standing shoulder to shoulder with each other. The couple was looking in my direction. I thought they looked familiar, but I couldn't quite figure out who they were at that initial moment. As I kept walking and got closer to the young couple, the man was standing at the woman's left, and he started pointing at me. The man then got a big smile on his face. He then spoke very loud in a joyful tone and said, "Hey, there's Larry!" Now, Larry isn't my real name, but he was calling me by my real name in the dream. The smile on the man's face seemed to grow even bigger, if that was possible. His smile seemed bigger than any smile I had ever seen on anyone, and he seemed more joyful than I had ever seen anyone act before. He looked thrilled to see me and was extremely joyful. His joyful gesture turned into waving hello as I got closer to him as I walked along the path. His pleasant attitude and kind gesture made me feel happy to see someone so kind. As I got about 15 to 20 feet from the man, which is about 5 to 7 meters, I thought he looked like a young version of my grandfather. I then noticed that the woman standing next to him looked like a younger and more slim version of my grandmother. She seemed to stand there with her head leaned a bit to her left, and she seemed to have a sly smile on her face. She then gave a calm, gentle wave as if to calmly say hello. I then recognized the man as my grandfather and noticed that he looked a lot like he did when we visited him when I was a young child. I knew it had to be my grandparents. I smiled and waved at them, but some unknown force seemed to compel me to keep walking further down the path. It almost seemed like I was walking away into a bright yellow sunset. As the bright light of the sunset surrounded me, I couldn't see anything around me. I then awoke from the dream. This dream made me feel very happy, and I noticed that I never dreamed about my grandfather until after he had passed on. I also had a few haunting dreams in the 80s and 90s where I saw my grandmother in her house after she had died. I kept wanting to turn to her and ask how she got it there in the house. I wanted to ask, saying, "Hey, I thought you were dead. Didn't you die? I heard you died." Yet every time I turned toward her to ask, I got struck with an inability to talk, and I couldn't move. I could only stand there and look at her. The final dream, where I saw both my grandparents smiling, left me with a very peaceful and happy feeling. I felt very content as I saw them both standing along the side of the path in the dream. I often wonder if I was seeing them in heaven or if I had visited heaven. Perhaps it meant that they were happy and doing well in heaven themselves, and after a while I'd meet them again in heaven someday. Whatever it was, I was happy to see them both and to see them so happy. Both of these dreams about these different relatives seem to have some interesting aspects of the dreams. I often think about those things and sometimes contemplate whether I was visiting heaven or perhaps I was just having a vision of them in heaven, and it kind of reassured me that they were there in heaven and that they were all happy and at peace. As for now, if you like this video and want to see more videos like this, please click the thumbs up like button. That lets me know that people appreciate this show. It also helps the algorithm so other people can find this show. As always, remember to click subscribe or follow on Rumble so you can make sure you don't miss an episode. You might also click on the little arrow on YouTube's subscribe button and make sure it's set to all. That way you can make sure you can get notifications for every episode that comes out. If there's anything you especially liked about the show, feel free to comment about it down below in the comments section. If you would like for me to give more details or clarification on any of these events, you can ask about it in the comments section. As usual, watch to the end of the credits because I'll give some comments or previews on the next episode of the show. So make sure you watch all the way to the end. So, I'm Larry Scaring All Hollingster, your host for Our Family's True Tales of the Supernatural. Now, that's not my real name, but that's my name I'll be using for this show. I hope to see you in the next episode where we'll talk about more tales of the supernatural. As for now, I'll just say good night, don't let the bed bugs bite, and don't let the ghosts give you a fright. Or in my case, don't let the lingering shadow figure scare you at night. Let's also remember, as Amy Allen says, ghosts are people too. They just don't have bodies. So remember that you should never speak ill of the dead. So always remember to be kind and respectful to everyone. I hope to see you in the next episode of the show. Goodbye for now.